focused on the preventive controls for human food rule and its primary component, the food safety plan. What I'm going to talk about today, just briefly, is another part of the entire piece that is just starting to come into play now. And that is the Intentional Adulteration Act. The full name is Mitigating Factors Against the Intentional Contamination of Food. In the industry, they just call it the IA rule. And this focuses more on your disgruntled employees. It came out of the Bioterrorism Act of 2002, which at that time dealt with the possibility of the food supply being attacked by terrorism. Over time, they found that the chances of that happening are much less, whereas a disgruntled employee throwing ground glass into baby food or corporate espionage or taking part of food fraud is much greater. And usually when they talk about it, you see something along the lines of what you see there, where you have somebody putting something, anything into a raw material. Again, it could be something very simple, like an ingredient that could cause a recall. It could be ground glass or metal shavings. You never know. That's the whole point of this. Basically, with the plan, it's similar to a food safety plan, as you can see, in that the format is very similar. You have your assessments, you have your analysis, you have your controls. And it's also risk-based, just like a food safety plan is. But where it differs is that instead of a hazard analysis where you're looking at what the biological, the chemical, or the physical hazards are, you're looking at it from a vulnerability assessment point of view. Where in the process? Not what is the contaminant, but where the contaminant can enter. And the focus. FDA's decided that there are 4 areas, what they call key types. And it's usually in bulk, such as bulk liquids, and any time there is a mixing or a blending. They feel that because of such things as hatches and piping systems and transit systems, these are the areas that can most likely be affected. So the first part, again, is developing a food defense plan. The second part, and this ties into part of what Michael was saying before about what's coming up in 2020, is training. The first thing that anybody needs to do is get trained. Trained in food defense or intentional adulteration, how to monitor it, what to look for, what are the best practices that can be done in your place to reduce it. Because there's no way, just like with food safety, there is no way to 100% eliminate a problem. You can only do the best you can to control it. Because you can have the best system in place, but there's one thing that's 5 letters long that'll throw it off, and that's human. The human factor will throw the best system out of whack every single time. So training is how you best manage that. So in 2020,
Could you give that for me, Michael? He's late. Somebody else is stuck in traffic.
we're going to be conducting some training sessions for the members of the council. We're currently negotiating on the dates, the where and the when, but these are representations of some of the topics that we'll be covering. Food safety basics, which can range from how to wash your hands correctly to how to clean equipment, how to document it all. Because FDA, as far as they're concerned, if it's not documented, it's not done. Regulatory compliance, again, that ties into your intentional adulteration records, that ties into your food safety records. And courses such as food defense and intentional adulteration. These sessions will be live sessions. We will be doing little quizzes, tests, because FDA, if nothing else, loves to see little quizzes and tests on file to show that you guys actually do remember what's being taught. We're also going to be looking at doing some other classes that will be a little shorter than these. These will probably be running about a day each, but we'll be running shorter ones along the lines of, the time it takes to run this meeting, on things like how to get through a regulatory inspection, and smaller topics such as that. Are there any questions?
Can we go a little more into depth on some of the courses and what it takes to get onto the course and what they need or require?
Well, basically, for the food safety basics, the primary thing is understanding that you need to have this in place and a desire to show up. Keep an open mind. A lot of the times, even some of the most basic food safety concepts can hit a brick wall if you look at it and go, well, we've always done it this way for however long, and we've never had a problem. So keeping an open mind on a lot of these concepts is key, because there's going to be things that you'll have never heard of before. How to document your sanitation, how to inspect. Yes?
If they put all this in place, and when they have any idea of what's percentage that they're going to stop? People want to do something, they'll do something, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's no way to, but I guess this is some food benefit. It's going to make it a little harder, maybe.
It will make it a little harder because a lot of places don't take into account the amount of work that goes into maintaining this. One of the things that we do at Essential Food Safety Consulting is we will help you put these things into place and develop what you need. The hard part then becomes the maintenance at that point, and that's where the human factor that I mentioned before comes into play. Yes?
When you do or you suggest training, is this training for your food safety inspectors in a plant, or do you do like workplace harassment training where we train everybody to see what you see is important?
We can do both. And we can talk about that afterwards. What other options going on site to your facility and such, and helping employees understand that. Because, again, when it comes to doing training sessions like this, most of the time the people that come in are the owners or the managers. But it's more important that we get to those frontline employees. And sometimes they don't, because of production schedules and such, they can't get to these things. So we can certainly talk with you about coming in and handling that with those frontline employees.
Is this required by law to have somebody on site that is actually certified?
No, you don't need somebody certified on site for the Food Safety Modernization Act, but you need to have somebody available to you who is.
On payroll or just someone
No,
walking
not
the
on.
streets?
I'm sorry.
Someone just walking the streets, or just
No, you would need to talk with somebody such as us. Everybody who works for Essential Food Safety Consulting is certified through FDA on handling these things. We have worked with a number of customers going through FDA inspections specifically on the Food Safety Modernization Act.
Do you have any insurance people here? Is there a requirement of their insurance too now to get all this somebody in place?
This is the best insurance policy you can have.
Yeah, I imagine you would be somewhat insulated from a suit, provided you did everything.
Yeah, this is part of your due diligence. Yes?
Not to support Big Brother, but how helpful are cameras in production areas as a preventative?
For the intentional adulteration, it's definitely a big step forward. It helps with a number of things. It helps with monitoring your production lines to make sure that things are not being done to tamper with the product. It helps control contractors and visitors. You can see then if they're in an area they're not supposed to be. So,
Just from a historical perspective, unless someone's watching it.
yeah, that's the problem. If somebody's looking at these records once a month, it doesn't really do as good a job for you then.
Right.
So, yes.
I'm just curious, would you say that the employees who might contaminate were not properly screened before they were hired? Or do they get to a company and they find they're getting burnt out, low pay, and that's what maybe...
It's more of the latter than it is the former. The vetting processes now that I've encountered in companies are getting much stricter. So it's more the burned out, more the disgruntled person. I didn't get this promotion, or I didn't get a raise, or so I'll stick it to them. I'll make them regret that choice.
Because
Yes.
I
Oh, sorry.
understand that at companies that have 24-hour plants, that's when you'll get the most, I don't wanna be on call on a weekend,
Yeah, that definitely, you will find that rate higher than a place that runs Monday to Friday, one shift, and everybody's out by 3. Yes.
Do you feel that the international regulations regarding directions, ingredients, spoil dates, and what's on a packaging, do you feel that some of the government's regulations for these items should be along the lines of how we handle our own items? Just being that most of it seems to be, if it's somebody from another country, a terrorist attack or like that, it would be on our own products before it would be on an international product because those regulations are already there?
Yes, and that's actually covered by a different section of the Act. It's called the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, where they would need to provide you with the same amount of documentation that you would need to provide to FDA if they came in and looked at what you were doing. So they would be expecting you to have, if they have a third-party certification from an outside company coming into a certain set of standards, those records, an analysis of the product. Is there a history of food fraud? Is there a history of some other issues? Specifications, all of these things that, if a food safety plan or a HACCP plan, depending upon which country you are in, because FDA has decided that certain countries, their system is similar enough to what they have with the Food Safety Modernization Act that they don't have to do exactly what we would have to do. So they could keep what they're doing, but just so long as they provide you with the most current versions of what they have.
Is the FDA providing any of the companies with a set of procedures that they can use in their own companies?
No, they are
Show
relying.
who these people may kind of things to prevent and mitigate the risk of somebody being so pissed off at their boss that they're going to do whatever.
No, they tend to rely more on industry to come up with those procedures themselves. There are resources available. Again, if you're looking at something like food fraud, there's a ton of industry-provided resources that are available. They're starting to come into play now with food defense as well, because that was just recently rolled out. They're not as developed as food fraud ones are. Yes?
You find the equipment manufacturers are helping to help with the defense and creating machines that have ways of testing or filtering out foreign objects, where they don't.
The foreign material detection has gotten more sophisticated than it was when I first got into industry. When I first got into industry, it was very scary what was out there. But now, a lot of the devices that are available, whether they're magnets or they're filters or the detectors, X-rays certainly, are becoming more sophisticated. They're doing a much better job of capturing and identifying and alerting when something's in there.
I have a client that has a metal detector on their line, for foreign objects.
Yeah.
Do they have to check wire after it though?
They do, but it's not really.
They just take the food patch.
Yeah. That was the whole big thing back long time ago when Pepsi, there was talk about Pepsi with a needle in their soda. Okay, yeah, which is impossible. Those cans are being filled at 2,000 a minute. Okay, so they're racing by. But it made Frito-Lay rethink their whole process that they couldn't track their product except to an 8-hour window. And through the change in technology, printing technology on their bag, they now know down to the minute when that was, what line it was done on, what plant it was done on, who was the operator of the machine, who was the packer at the end of the line. They track all of that, and then when someone complains about metal being in their bag or something, they sit there and they go, well, look, our metal detector was this, and our check wire was this for the 10 minutes before and the 10 minutes after, and that bag was exactly like every other bag in weight.
Yeah, the traceability capabilities now in industry, again, along with foreign material detection, have just grown in leaps and bounds over the past 15 to 20 years.
And in that case, it ultimately was proven that the consumer was the one who had
Correct.
used it.
Correct.
Yes.
Try to sit there and try to throw it in at 2,000 a minute.
Company, and I source my almonds and my agave and my thick cut oats from reputable sources. So I'm combining all these things together. I only work with family. So as far as if it's down the chain, trickle down, if something happens, I catalog the lot numbers of the things that, and so when the product comes, I know somebody asks with according to the date, these products went in with this lot number. So it would just be, is that the extent of the responsibility that I can take to make sure that the
You need to
products-
you need to test your procedures at least once a year.
and
just
that
do it-
meaning-
Do a mock recall. Do a mock recall, just pick an ingredient
Okay,
and go back to see who you got it from. You know, starting with that point,
okay,
take the ingredient, find everything you made with that ingredient, trace it forward to who you sold it to. It's called one forward, one back. And show you have documented everything as to who you sold it to, how much, when, the contact information on that company. And for FDA, if you're trying this, you want to be able to capture as close to 100% as possible. Plus or minus 2% is the window they look at, within 4 hours. If you try doing it on a weekend, you've got 8.
can you say that again, because I didn't absorb what you just said. Sorry.
That's okay. FDA has a window that they like to see this completed in.
Okay,
Because in a real situation, if it happens Monday to Friday, they expect you to be able to pull up all this information within 4 hours.
okay. So-
Plus minus
so
2%.
one of my ingredients, I'm notified that one of the ingredients that I've used is contaminated.
Yes.
I've made my product with it. I need to be able to contact who I source my product out to.
Yeah, who you sold it
Who
to.
I sold it out to,
Even if you just sold it to a distributor, not directly to a customer, but to a distributor,
yeah,
you need to identify that distributor, that immediate customer to you.
got it.
You need to gather the contact information for all of them. And you need to do it according to FDA. If it happens Monday to Friday, you have 4 hours. Saturday to Sunday, you have 8.
Okay.
Because in their mind, there's fewer people available to work on that on a weekend than there are during a week.
Is it like Men in Black that show up within those 4 hours?
You don't want to know what happens in that timeline. I've seen it happen. But you don't want to go through it yourself. It's very nerve-wracking, which again is one of the reasons why we're going to be developing a class on what happens when FDA or Suffolk County or any inspector knocks on your door, because you could know everything about your product, who you get it from, what you do, where it goes. FDA or New York State or somebody comes knocking on your door. I've seen people who've been doing this for 10, 15 years just all of a sudden lose every capability of coherent speech. They just stumble over the slightest thing because they're very nervous. And they don't know, they're afraid that if they say something, it's going to come right back around on them.
Going back to that previous conversation, terminology in the packaging industry is track and trace.
Yeah.
You have to be able to track it and trace it through the supply chain, whether it's coming into you or it's going out of you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And then we'll get those dates together in a plan and
Yes.
release traceability on the products and
Yeah, we should have that knocked out in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm hoping.
between holidays and everything else.
Exactly. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.